Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire trench simply falls silent? When hundreds of voices fade away at once, leaving only the distant sound of wind and paper being ripped by trembling hands. This is a letter from 1917, written by a British soldier in the muddy depths of World War I, somewhere forgotten between the Somme and Arras. The document was locked for over a century inside an iron box, covered in rust and dried mud. No one was supposed to read it, but today you'll hear every word exactly as it was written. The letter begins with simple sentences, like so many others sent from the front: longing, cold, fear, hope of returning home. But at some point in the early morning, the writing changes. The soldier describes something the official diaries never recorded, an absolute dense silence that took over the trench at 3 in the morning. No shots, no moans, just an emptiness that seemed to hear back. Between the damp stains and the faded military postmark, there's a detail that shouldn't be there. A charcoal mark, a continuous line, as if someone were trying to scratch out the sound itself. What did this man hear or fail to hear on that frozen night in 1917? And why did his letter never reach its destination? The envelope still carries the smell of wet earth, and something else which you need to hear for yourself. Before I start reading this letter with you, can I ask you something quick? If this story made you curious, give it a like below. It seems like a small thing, I know, but every time you do this, YouTube understands that it's worth showing these forgotten voices to more people. This way, these letters, which have been trapped in time, continue to be heard. And if you enjoy this kind of true story, written by real people, subscribe to the channel now. Just press that red button below. That way, you won't be left out of the next discoveries. There are many letters and diaries we'll still open together. Oh, and turn on the bell too. When the notification arrives, it's like someone knocking on your door with another time-lost envelope. I promise every story will be worth it. Ready? Then take a deep breath, because now, the reading of the 1917 letter will begin. I lift the lid of the box slowly. The metal creaks a little like an old door. The smell that comes out is of long-stored paper, a hint of damp earth, a hint of iron. I pick up the letter with both hands. The paper is thick, rough against my fingertips. It has jagged, yellowed edges like bread that's been left in the oven too long. In the upper right corner is a worn, slanted stamp. December 21st, 1917. The light hits and reveals small, raised fibers. I bring my eyes closer, let the sound of the rain outside drift in gently, and begin. My dear Mary. The handwriting is neat, but you can feel the rush. Letters touch, slipping against each other. He talks about the cold, but he doesn't use complicated words. He says his skin burns, and at the same time, numbs him. He says, water seeps through his boots. His socks feel heavy. The ground gives a little, as if breathing. I stop for a moment and listen to what he means. The ground rises and falls, the mud pushes, then pulls. Anyone who's stepped on soggy ground knows this movement. I keep reading. He says the coffee arrives lukewarm and leaves cold. He says that when someone laughs, it's a quiet laugh, so as not to draw attention to the darkness. The page has a crease in the middle, a mark from an old fold. I run my fingernail lightly along this line and feel a thin groove. Next to the fold, a dark stain the size of a coin. I don't know if it's ink spread by water. I don't know if it's clay that's dried. I'm not making it up. I'm describing it. I turn the paper slightly toward the camera and let you see what I see. There's a military postmark, now nearly illegible, with numbers that look like R1127. I keep this information because numbers in old documents are a trail. I follow. He mentions a sergeant who tells jokes that no one finds funny, just to break the silence between one slap and another outside. He says that a colleague keeps a strand of his fiancée's hair inside his helmet, tucked into a kind of envelope. Another swears he hears it. Bells late at night, even without a church nearby. The letter's author comments on this as if noting the weather. No drama, no exaggeration. And then he repeats a phrase twice as a warning. It's not the enemy. He writes, breathes, writes again. It's not the enemy. The handwriting at this point loses a bit of its firmness. The T rises and doesn't cross. The S looks like a hook. I look up from the page for a moment to give you the background without breaking the spell. Late 1917, sector of Somme. The war has been going on for a long time. Rain, mud, long nights. There are reports of unexpected calm in some early mornings. Officers call it a pause for adjustment, a miscalculation, an order that never arrived. In carefully guarded files, there are mentions of a short window of silence, but what this letter describes is not just a tactical pause, it is something else, something more intimate, more homely, almost domestic, and therefore more frightening. I return to the paper. He writes times in the margin 0247, just below 0258, and then he draws a long line, like a train track, and writes 03, 0. The sentence is simple, without flourish. The trench fell silent at 3 in the morning. I read slowly. He says the silence was so thick you could hear water dripping down the earthen walls. He says no one coughed, no one shifted their weight. Even the rats stopped. He uses an image I can almost feel in my skin. The rain blinked, as if the world had turned off and on again. 5 seconds, maybe less, but it registers as if it were a century deep within his chest. The pencil scratches the paper in one spot, leaving a deeper line. Immediately after, he writes, "Before the silence, I thought someone was counting softly. A thin, low count, as if coming from very far away or very close. 1, 2, 3. He doesn't know where the sound came from. He writes, "It wasn't theirs." He writes, "It wasn't ours." And he reinforces, "I wasn't sick. No fever, no alcohol." His effort here is to avoid being mistaken for delirium. It's as if he's asking the reader, Mary, you, me, to believe what comes next. I notice the handwriting in this passage. It's a little smaller, tighter, like someone trying to save space for fear of running out of paper before the idea. At the bottom of the first page, there's a small charcoal drawing, a line that rises and falls, like the spine of a hill. At the bottom, he writes, parapet. At the top, an X. Next to the X, again, 03, Mare. Almost like a simple map of a point in the dark. I keep that X with me. It comes back later. I turn the page carefully. The back is better preserved. The ink here is a darker brown, as if the pen had more fluidity at this point. Mary, if I don't, come back. Don't read this near the living room clock. I pause, I repeat, because this sentence cuts through the air. Don't read this near the living room clock. Then he writes, he knows the time. The clock, the household object. It's not a war warning. It's a home warning. It's the kind of advice we give to those we love when we have no other defense to offer. I inhale through my nose and get back on track. The author remembers a companion who thought he heard a whistle, thin, cutting, through the air, calling someone by name. The word whistle appears in quotation marks, lightly underlined, and just below he writes, don't follow the whistle, as if it were an ancient order, passed down by word of mouth without a manual. Here, I'll briefly link it to another source. In a notebook from a nearby platoon in the same region, there's a very similar phrase, vento de voz. It's not confirmation, it's rhyme. When distant documents rhyme, we hear better. He describes the body. He avoids strong terms. He says his fingers ache like when you hold ice for too long, that his cheeks lose sensation and from time to time burn without warning. He says that when the wind changes, the canvas roof shivers. And he notes an image that has stayed with me since the first reading. I felt like the sound of my heart was outside. I read slowly. It's the only way this sentence fits in its entirety. This isn't a writer's embellishment. It's someone trying to explain the inexplicable with small words. The heart beating out of the chest is terror without blood. It's fright without a scream. The bottom corner has a diagonal scratch. It could be a fingernail, a splinter, or the pen itself hitting something. The scratch cuts off half the word, wait. It becomes esp. Below he starts over. His hand trembles a little, you can see it. The R becomes more open, the A more oval. He writes, if everything goes quiet again, I don't know if I'll stay. And right after, I won't name what I heard. This man tries to shield himself from words. Naming pulls him closer, and yet he keeps writing, because writing is a rope. It holds us in the very place where the mind would like to escape. I'll take you one step further into the context, without leaving the letter. Hindenburg Line, a German strategic retreat, cut through that region with shelters, tunnels, and observation points. Foggy mornings, suppressed noise, and blurred distances. There are reports of echo that give voice back to those who speak softly. There are memories of disorientation by cold and hunger. All of this fits the real world. At the same time, this document carries another kind of fright, Not the grenade, but the room with the clock. Not the whistle, but the ownerless whisper. The mixture of the two, the technical and the intimate, is what keeps us here. I touch the surface of the paper with the side of my index finger. I feel small grains, perhaps old dust, perhaps sand trapped in the fibers. Near the middle of the second page, there's a darker vertical mark as if a drop had leaked and stopped. The ink around it has spread like a dried flower. The word next to this mark is pointer. He writes, "Don't look at the pointer." Just below, in smaller letters, 2:59. It's as if he's trying to hold the dawn at that moment, as if he's rejecting the advance, staying on the verge, refusing the 3. I look again at R1127. This type of notation appears in some batches of military correspondence from the period, especially when they were sorted before being sent on. It can't be a shortcut to absolute truth, but it's a clue, and clues in this work are bricks. We stack them, without forcing a shape, until the structure stands on its own. I return to reading. If they call my name, I respond with silence. He highlights this with a short line under the sentence. He doesn't underline the entire sentence, just lightly touching on what he wants to emphasize. The decision to respond with silence, it's strong. It's not giving up. It's protection. The call, from whoever it may be, loses strength when it finds no response. This is true in ordinary life. It's doubly true in a scenario of fear. You notice I speak simply, as if I'm telling a story to someone young, curious, sitting in the front row. I do this on purpose, because it's the document that should shine, not my speech. My job here is to open up space, to show you the crooked handwriting, the wrinkled paper, the worn stamp, the repeated time. To listen with you, to read with you, to walk through the mud with my mind, not my feet. In the footer on the left, I find something that would have gone unnoticed if I were in a hurry. A tiny, almost disappearing number. It could be part of the batch, it could be the writer's identification, it could be something else. It appears as 7 to 6. I keep it in my head. I remember a phrase from earlier, count to 6 before answering. I put one thing after another, without rushing. The work here is patient. When documents speak softly, we don't shout over them. We lean in close. The author returns to everyday life to suddenly tug at our heartstrings. He tells of a fellow who lay down for a while, leaning against a sandbag. The young man said that when he closed his eyes, he heard steps that didn't disturb the earth. 2 light steps. They stopped. 2 steps. They stopped. He doesn't use the word fear in this passage. He uses wait. Waiting sat beside me. I hold my breath. I continue. He says that for a brief moment, he thought he saw the canvas trembling in the opposite direction of the wind. Just a breath, and it was over. I know you want to know if this explains everything. Not yet. Now, at the beginning of the body of the episode, I want you to feel the texture, the weight of the paper, the errant hand, the appointed time, the notice from home, the whispered countdown, the "don't look at the clock." The explanation, if it exists, doesn't need to come rushing in. The power of this story lies in its slow pace. I let the letter rest on the table for a second. The light reflects in a brief glow, which quickly fades. I pick it up again because it asks for my hand. Mary, I marked an X on the map, but don't send it to anyone. I don't know if this place exists when the day comes. This passage overwhelms me, a place that exists one moment and disappears the next. It's not book magic. It's the brain trying to protect us from a place that hurts. Still, it left its mark, because those who write leave their mark on the world, even if the world erases it later. I could stop here, but the paper calls. There's more. Before I go any further, I'll cross-reference one fact with you. In a chaplain's notebook from a village near Arras, on a very close date, there's this line. There was a silent dawn. It felt like church. It's not much, I know. Just one sentence. But it's a sentence that speaks to what this soldier felt. If a candle burns in 2 places at the same time, perhaps the wind is the same. Perhaps not. Still, we record it. I return to the text respectfully, like someone entering someone else's home and taking off their hat. The next paragraph is short, nervous, almost comma-free. If I hear it again, I'll tie the watch strap around my wrist and count softly. Not to call, to hold. The idea of hold the time with a ribbon. He grabs me by the throat. He's not talking about the hands here. He's talking about the strap, the leather. What holds the watch? To the body. It's as if he's saying, I don't call the time, I tie myself to it. Near the end of this section, the letters lose ink. The lines become paler. The paper sucks the color. Perhaps the pen was running low. Perhaps the hand was tired. He writes, "If everything goes silent again, I won't speak. I won't look. I won't name. I leave this triad suspended in the air because it works like a prayer. When we don't understand, we repeat. And repetition, sometimes, saves." The tip of the paper trembles slightly between my fingers. The air in the room seems heavier now. With each word I read, the sound of the rain outside shifts, as if the house itself is breathing along with me. The soldier's handwriting grows tighter, as if the cold is gripping his hand. The ink begins to fade in places, and he runs his pencil over the letters, almost disappearing. I can imagine him leaning against the mud wall, using the dim light of a candle, trying to finish what he needs to say before the silence returns. He writes again about the clock. He says that when he looks at it, the hand seems to be ticking faster than it should. He says the sound of the seconds gets louder when everyone is asleep. Sometimes it seems like the clock is running backward, he writes. I repeat slowly, running backward. This image haunts me. I think of a clock that goes back in time, that tries to erase what just happened. He says that some of his companions also notice the same sound, but that no one comments. Aloud, as if speaking might wake up what is silent, the next line is nearly illegible. The line rises and falls as if struggling with fatigue. The candlelight has dimmed. The trench sleeps. It's a short sentence, but you can sense the fear hidden within. He describes the wind rushing through the canvas, the flame flickering and then stopping completely. Everything goes out. Only the smell of wax remains. I imagine that moment, the total darkness, the sound of breathing, the cold trapping the air. It's at times like these that the body seems to hear what isn't there, and it does. They called my name, he says, but everyone was lying down. I read this and feel a chill on the back of my neck. He tries to describe the voice. He says it was low, calm, almost familiar. It sounded like the voice of home. He asks in the letter, "Have you ever heard someone say your name in the middle of the night and knew it was no one?" It's the kind of question that keeps bouncing around in your head. I know you've been through something similar. That moment when the silence becomes so great it seems to speak. The soldier writes faster, as if trying to shake off the memory. He says he pulled the blanket up to his chin, closed his eyes, and began counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and stopped. He stops at 6. The pen presses hard against the paper at this point. The tip must have scratched the table underneath. I can see the effort. You can almost hear the sharp crack of the pencil. And then he says, the voice didn't come anymore. For a few seconds, only the sound of the wind enters the scene. I read in silence and let the emptiness speak for itself, because sometimes fear is precisely the interval between one sound and another. The letter continues. He speaks of his companion named Henry. He says Henry woke up soon after and asked if he was okay. He answered yes, but he lied. Henry looked at his watch and said, "Everything's still." The soldier looked too. The hands didn't move. And suddenly they both heard the first shot of the morning, as if the war had begun to breathe again. At that moment I close my eyes and try to imagine the scene. The field still dark, the fog covering the horizon, the wet ground, two men staring at a clock that refuses to move, and when the sound of war returns, it's as if the world has taken a forced step forward. The letter continues. After that, no one wanted to talk about what happened. They say time stood still for a minute, but I know it was 7. 7 minutes of nothing. 7 minutes in which the noise of life disappeared. He begins a new paragraph. His handwriting improves slightly. Perhaps he's changed his pen. "I don't want anyone to think I'm crazy," he writes. "I just want someone to know." And that's why the letter exists. It's the plea of a man who saw the absurdity and needed to record it, even if no one would believe it. It's the same with all lost documents. They're the truth's way of escaping oblivion. I glance at the corner of the table and see the old map that came with the letter. It's small, penciled, covered in scribbles and crossed out lines. There's a spot marked with an X, just like the one on the letter. Next to it, the number 3 and a thick line running all the way to the margin. When I first saw this map, I thought it was just a joke or a scale error. But no, I compared it with a military map from the same period. The sector exists. Only in the official records the name of the trench is crossed out in black ink. No other sector was covered like this. This prompted me to write to the historical archives asking for an explanation. To this day, they haven't responded. I returned to the letter. Today the sky became brighter. I thought the silence was over, but it's back. Now it comes from within. The sentence is short and direct. The silence has become a living thing, living within him. He describes a faint sound, like knocking on wood, 3 times, always at the same interval. It sounds like someone asking for permission. I hold the paper tighter. There's a tenseness in the air that's hard to explain. The way he writes transforms emptiness into presence. Each pause is a shadow. The soldier tries to convince himself it's his imagination. He says, maybe it's just the wind. But then he adds, the wind doesn't blow twice in the same place. He knew something was wrong. The letter continues with a confession. I'm afraid of falling asleep and waking up alone. It's a small human fear and therefore so true. Between war and the supernatural, the worst fear is disappearing without a witness. He says he dreamed he was returning home to find the living room clock stopped at 3. The fireplace flame was lit. Mary's portrait turned away. He approaches and hears the same whistle from the trench coming from inside the clock. Don't follow the whistle. The phrase returns. He wakes up sweating, holds the watch to his wrist and sees the same time. 3 clicks. I close my eyes for a second while reading to imagine the sensation, the confusion between dream and reality, the moment when time seems to mock those who try to measure it. The handwriting changes again, this time thinner, almost fragile. Henry disappeared last night, he writes. He left his boots, his gun, and his watch. This line is difficult to read. The ink seems to have spread like a blur. No one heard a sound. He continues. The mud covered the footprints as soon as dawn broke. The tone isn't one of terror, it's one of exhaustion. It's the weariness of someone who doesn't understand but accepts. This is how fear sometimes wins, through resignation. He mentions that the commander ordered a sector change. We were moved east, but the new camp clock also stopped at 3. The detail is important. While researching archives, I found a note from a communications engineer stating that week, several chronometers failed simultaneously. Official document, authentic stamp. No one linked it to anything supernatural, just another technical problem. But coincidence or not, the record matches the letter. I read a little more. The morning light arrived and the sky was white. It looked like paper. He says he tried to write another letter, but the pencil broke twice. He says there's no candle left, only the faint glow of day. The text begins to repeat itself in short snippets, like an echo. I heard the silence. I heard the silence. It's as if he's trying to prove to himself that he still has control over words. In wars and in memories, to repeat is to resist. His voice changes tone at the bottom of the page. Mary, don't throw this paper away. Even if no one understands, keep it. I hold the document carefully, feeling the weight of the request. He didn't want fame, nor glory. He wanted remembrance. He wanted someone to read it one day and say, he existed. And that's why we're here now, reading it together. So many years later, because every lost letter is a second chance for someone to be heard. On the back of the sheet, there is a single word, written in larger letters. Listen, listen, say nothing else. That's all. It's almost an order. And that's what you and I are doing now, listening. Listening to a man who lived 100 years ago, trying to leave a piece of himself on a piece of paper. There's silence between the words, and it's in that silence that the truth often hides. After I finished reading the last word, listen, I stared at the paper for a while. The rain continued outside. The clock on the wall seemed to slow down, and for a moment I felt like the sound of my own breathing was coming from another room. That's how this kind of letter works on us. It doesn't scream, it doesn't scare, it just changes the air in the room. I put the envelope away, closed the iron box, and began searching for answers. The first place I looked was the London Military Archives. They keep lists, reports, field diaries, and correspondence that time has nearly erased. After a few weeks, I received an email with a registration number that caught my attention, R1127, the same as the letter. The document existed, or at least had existed, but was marked with a simple note, lost in 1972. No explanation, no final destination, It was as if the archive itself had gone silent, like the trench at 3 in the morning. I kept searching. In a public database, I found the name of a British soldier who served in that region. His name was Thomas Ainsworth, a native of a village called Whitby. Date of birth, 1896. Missing in action, December 1917. There was no body, no burial record, just a note in the report, last seen near trench sector 7-6. The same number that was at the bottom of the letter, 76. Too much of a coincidence to ignore. I typed his name into a broader search and found a newspaper article published in 1920. The title was Soldier's Letter, Found in France. Contents, unexplained. The article told of a farmer who had found an envelope while rebuilding an underground shelter. The contents were not disclosed. The article said only that the letter caused discomfort to those who read it. No photograph, no facsimile, nothing. But the soldier's name was the same, Thomas Ainsworth. That was enough to reignite the mystery. I picked up the map again. The X drawn in charcoal marked a spot that today sits within a small forest near a river. From the satellite image, the terrain forms a nearly perfect circle. When I zoomed in, I noticed an irregular shadow, as if the ground had sunk somewhere. It could be anything: erosion, an underground gallery, a forgotten well. But in my work, anything is always the beginning of a new question. I returned to the letter. I reread the passage about the watch. Don't look at the hand. I looked up manufacturing records. The watches issued to the British Army during that period were standardized. Some models were made by a company called Smith & Son. I found a photograph of a specimen preserved in a museum. On the dial, engraved in tiny letters, was the inscription, "Hold time, holding time." The same idea the soldier described when he said he tied the watch strap to his wrist to hold it. Every detail seemed to echo within another. While researching, I discovered something curious. Several diaries from soldiers on the same front mention brief pauses, moments when sound disappeared completely. One wrote, "It seemed as if someone had turned off the world." Another, dated December 22nd, says, "The wind stopped and the ground breathed." None of these men knew each other, but they all used similar imagery. It was as if they were describing the same night through different eyes. When separate documents repeat themselves, it's a sign that something is there, even if that something is simply shared fear. I also looked in the Whitby civil records. There was a Mary, yes, Mary Turner, 22 years old, in 1917. Her name appeared on a war mailing list, the recipient of a letter that was never delivered. I don't want to romanticize, I don't want to invent what I don't know, but it's impossible not to imagine this woman waiting for a letter that never arrived, looking at the living room clock, listening to the wind blowing through the window, and wondering if the hand had stopped. I spoke the letter aloud again, testing the sound of the words. When I said 3 in the morning, the echo seemed to take longer to return. Maybe it was just my imagination, maybe not. I began to realize that all this material, the paper, the stamp, the map, the number 76, formed a kind of code made of coincidences. The more I read, the more the silence between the lines grew, and that's when I found what would change everything. Among the digitized files of the Imperial War Museum, there is a collection of technical reports on acoustic phenomena in the trenches. One of them, dated 1918, speaks of recurrent auditory anomalies between sectors 6 and 8, including sound interruptions lasting up to 7 minutes. 7 minutes, the same duration Thomas wrote. The report says the causes could be meteorological or psychological, but admits that some occurrences remain unexplained. This is actually written in an official document. No History Channel reported this part. I closed my eyes and imagined what it meant to be there. 7 minutes in which the entire world fell silent. No gunshots, no speech, not even an audible heartbeat. Just time trapped between 1 second and the next. It's the kind of silence the mind fills with anything. Memory, guilt, an old voice. Maybe that's why the soldier heard his own name. When everything around him fades, his mind lights up. I did some more research. I found another diary written by a nurse named William Carter a few days after the letter. He describes the disappearance of 2 soldiers during a quiet night. He writes that the tent they were in was untouched, but the clock hanging inside read 3 o'clock. Carter notes, "The captain ordered the clocks adjusted, but they were all already set. No body, no sound. His final sentence is almost identical to Thomas's. If you hear the whistle, don't answer. I began to feel that the story was bigger than a letter. It was a web of memories that touched each other from time to time, as if silence itself were returning to be remembered. And that's why these letters survive. Not because they escaped the war, but because someone heard them, even 100 years later. The night I read all this was long. The light from the screen reflected off the paper, and for a moment the 1917 postmark looked new. I thought about how time doubles when someone reads a forgotten document. I thought about how many other letters are trapped in boxes, waiting to be opened, and I thought about Thomas's reason for writing. Listening for him was perhaps the only way to continue existing. I opened the iron box again and noticed something I'd missed before. On the inside lid was a very faint, almost faded engraving. It looked like letters, but the metal was worn. I used a flashlight and read it slowly. 2 words: still here, still here. It could have been written by anyone at any time, but at that moment it felt like an answer. The letter ends by asking someone to keep the paper. The box responds by saying it's still there. 100-year-long silent dialogue. It was at this point that I decided to search for the exact location marked on the map. I used old coordinates, compared them with modern aerial photos, and found the spot. A clearing hidden among trees with no direct road access. In the image, a dark spot in the center, as if the ground had been disturbed. No record of construction, no sign of recent visitation. I closed the screen and wondered what I would do if I were there. Would I open the ground? Would I leave it alone? Sometimes the past just wants to be heard, not unearthed. I returned to the table, touched the letter one last time and felt the cool, almost damp paper. The sound of the rain had stopped. The clock on the wall read exactly 3, but I swear the hands didn't move. I stared at it until I felt it was time to stop. But before I put everything away, I noticed something on the envelope I hadn't noticed before. An old stamp glued upside down with the image of a bell, and just below, in tiny letters, a barely visible inscription: "Do not ring." I looked at the stamp glued upside down and felt a shiver. The bell, even worn, seemed to gleam in the dim light. The fine print said, "Do not ring. Don't touch. Don't wake up." That instruction felt more than a warning. It was almost a prayer. I took the envelope carefully. The bottom edge was loose. Time had opened a crack. Inside was a smaller piece of paper folded twice. I opened it slowly, afraid of tearing it. Inside, a sentence written in shaky handwriting. "If the bell rings, I am not the one who answers. If the bell rings, I am not the one who answers." I remained silent for a while. The house seemed to be waiting for something. The wind stopped, and the ticking of the wall clock seemed to move away, as if the sound were moving backward. I took a deep breath and went back to the text. Thomas had probably written that last night. The rest of the sheet was stained with moisture and soot. Further down, the date, December 22nd, 1917. No signature, just a dark spot in the corner, as if the feather had stopped there and never returned. I opened the journal I had set aside. Among the radio notes, an operator mentions an interrupted signal on the same date at exactly 3 o'clock. The registration code, R1127, the same number as the letter. Nothing else was written, just the note. Silence confirmed. The silence confirmed. From that point on, everything seems to repeat itself. The same words, the same times, the same pauses. It's as if the trenches had left a recording in time, and each reading rekindled the missing sound. I flip through the pages and smell rust and damp paper. The air gets colder, but maybe that's just my imagination. It's easy to believe the past is approaching when you call it by name. I placed the letter, map, and envelope on the table. The X design on the ground, the time, the warning not to ring the bell, it all formed a pattern. When I traced the lines on the modern map, the dots connected in a circle. In the center, exactly where the river bends, there is a small forgotten building. A stone bell tower without a church, without a door, without a bell. The local database says no one has lived nearby for decades, but when I zoomed in on the image, I saw something hanging inside the tower, ammetal wire, like that of a removed bell, and the reflection of something shining, perhaps glass. The butterflies in my stomach came automatically. I thought of Thomas. I thought of the phrase, "Do not ring." Perhaps he and the others had heard something. Coming from there, a sound that was not a sound, a call that was not a voice, And perhaps that morning at 3 someone answered. The rest were stuck in the mud, frozen over time. I went back to the paper, touched the words with my fingertips. The rough texture still held warmth, as if someone had just written it. It's this feeling that captivates us, the idea that time can store memories within objects. The letter is just the body. The voice still circulates. In the bottom corner of the last sheet, very small, there is a drawing that looks like a candle. Beside it, a single word written patiently. Home. Home. The same house he describes at the beginning. The clock, the fireplace, the turned portrait. Somehow he tried to leave a way back. The map, the X, the bell, the candle, all pointing home. And perhaps that is what he meant by holding time, keeping the memory of where he came from alive, even when the world around him fades away. I closed the envelope slowly and put it back in the box. The cold metal seems to breathe. As I slide the lid back on, I hear a soft click like a pendulum swinging back into place. I look at the clock on the wall. The hands move again. 3 and 1. 1 minute after the time marked on the letter. For the first time, time moves, and I let it. Thomas's letter is still here, among us. Not because it brings answers, but because it asks questions that time cannot silence. Maybe the whole war was just that, an attempt to hear something amidst the noise. And when the noise stopped, silence responded. Before I put this letter away, can I ask you something? If this story has kept you hooked this far, if at any point you felt the chill of silence Thomas described, leave your like now. It may seem small, but it's what makes YouTube understand that these forgotten voices still deserve to be heard. And if you're not yet part of our community of listeners to the past, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell. That way, when I open the next letter, one that came from much further away, straight from Vietnam, you'll be among the first to hear it. In the next episode, the story changes continent and tone. Her title is I Found a Vietnam Soldier's Secret Letter, 1970. The shadows were not human. What do you think he meant by that? And would you have the courage to read what was left behind? Comment below what you think the shadows they were. He writes, shadows if you want me to read this full letter in the next video. See you in the next diary entry. And until then, listen to the silence.